Welcome to Sports Beat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, April 7th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. The day after college basketball's national championship game would have been played, we stick with the sport on today's episode. Kansas State is coming off a last-place Big 12 finish, so what better time to turn over the roster? That's what Bruce Weber and staff are doing, and K-State beat writer Kellis Robinett tells us who's coming in, who's transferring out, and what the impact of all of this could have on next season. After a break, you'll hear from one of the nation's top sports columnists, Berry Tramel of the Oklahoman. Berry joined the Oklahoman in 1991, and his newspaper career started some 13 years earlier in his hometown of Norman. Nobody knows sports in Oklahoma better than Berry, and I wanted to get his thoughts about Oklahoma State coaching legend Eddie Sutton getting voted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. That announcement came on Saturday. It was clearly the right call, Berry and I agree, but he believes Sutton waited much too long to enter. But first, we jump in with Kellis Robinett, who said he was caught off guard a little bit by the decision of David Sloan to transfer from Kansas State.
The thought at the time was David Sloan was going to be back as a senior point guard, and they really wanted to add a wing with their final scholarship. So it was a little bit surprising to see that they didn't go that route and brought in a junior college point guard. But lo and behold, the reason was because they knew Sloan was on the way out. So basically they replaced one junior college point guard with another junior college point guard. Even more interesting, both of these guys happened to lead all of junior colleges in assists in back-to-back years. So it's kind of funny. They basically said, well, we're losing junior college transfer point guard after 1 year. Let's go out and find his closest replacement. But Rudy Williams does seem like a talented player and a possible nice late addition for the Wildcats. He averaged 21 points, almost 9 assists, and even rebounded the ball a little bit at Northeast Oklahoma A&M Junior College last season. And as I said, he led the country in assists. He's pretty good at scoring with the ball and distributing. So you never know with junior college players. It's a totally different game, totally different style of play once you get to the Big 12. But if you're going to add somebody late in the process, he seems like an okay option.
And am I jumping the gun to assume he will be the starting point guard next year, or did you think was that part of the selling pitch by Bruce Weber?
Well, it was certainly part of the selling pitch for him. I think he'll get every opportunity to start at point guard, but I wouldn't underestimate Nigel Pack coming in from Indianapolis as a true freshman for Kansas State next season. He was the very first person they recruited over the summer. A 4-star guy. He can score. He's got a lot of talent. He's just not quite as old as Rudy Williams. So I think it'll be a interesting competition between those two guys. Right now, I would actually lean a little bit toward Pack just because he's been involved with Kansas State longer. But as I mentioned, he'll be 2 years younger. Never know how that goes. Either way, you're going to see both of them play.
Why didn't it work out with David Sloan? As you said, he came in, with some good numbers from junior college. Started a little bit, I noticed, but why didn't it work out with him?
Yeah, it's an interesting deal. He's the one guy out of everybody who's left this offseason. He's the one guy who I think you can actually say, okay, I didn't see that coming. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. The best reason I can give is just that his role in the team was never totally defined. I think he started the year as their backup point guard, and then late in the year was their starting point guard. Then all of a sudden he was back to their backup point guard, and his playing style was just so much different from guys like Cartier-Jada and Sean Neal Williams when he was here early in the season. And I don't know that it just ever quite clicked as to what they wanted him to do with the offense as opposed to the other two guys. David Sloan's more of a distributor. And when he does score, it's just right at the rim when he has some fast break opportunities. Whereas the other guys who were playing were more create jump shots off the dribble and lead the offense that way. So, and he's also, he's from Louisville. He's not all that close to here. And I feel like if the coronavirus pandemic hadn't come down on us, he probably would have returned next season. But to go home and, spend all this time around friends and family who probably had a bunch of questions for him as why his first season at Kansas State wasn't a big success. I'm sure just going home and hearing a bunch of that made him think, you know what, maybe I can find a better situation. And I don't know where he'll end up. He's already transferred in here, so wherever he goes, he'll have to sit out a year before he goes and plays anywhere. But he's a good kid, and I wish him best of luck.
That's interesting that you think maybe the COVID might have something to do with him leaving. There's probably more of that happening in college sports than look. There's a lot of issues right now in college sports with eligibility of the spring semester athletes for next year, and I imagine that's got to factor into the minds of some college athletes maybe wanting to be closer to home. I don't know. I don't know, but if this is the first time I've heard of that for a college player. So
well, yeah, I mean, think about it. If he was here, if this wasn't going on, he'd be on campus right now practicing. They'd probably be telling him, you're going to be our starting point guard next year. We're going to be leaning on you. There'd be a whole lot less reason to transfer.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, we haven't talked since Cartier-Jada found a destination, and that is Virginia Tech. What is I think at the time when Jada announced that he wasn't returning to Kansas State, there was a little bit of thought that okay, he's just done with college basketball. Maybe not a player that's going to get drafted, but somebody who could make some money playing perhaps overseas, and or maybe G League. But the fact that he ended up at Virginia Tech, tell us about how that happened.
Well, basically, the obvious connection is that Chester Frazier, who used to be an assistant coach and recruited him at Kansas State, is now working at Virginia Tech. So that's really the only thing I can see. It's a little bit closer to his home in South Carolina as well, so maybe that played into it. But I think he is still planning on trying to go pro. He's at least going to test the waters and see how things go. I don't know what exactly he'll be, what he'll need to learn to decide to make the plunge and turn pro versus go to Virginia Tech, but he's leaving that door open. I think the coronavirus played a role in this too. I think if you were looking at a normal pre-draft process where he knew he would be getting workouts and traveling around and talking to people, then maybe he'd have a little bit more confidence going that route. But with all of this uncertainty, like you just mentioned, he's not. It's very unlikely he's going to be a draft pick. I don't know that he can even convince anybody to make a G League roster right now without trying out with in front of people. So it makes his path a little bit more difficult. And I think that's one reason why he decided, you know what, maybe college basketball is worth looking at for one more season.
Okay, let's talk about with Sloan leaving, that opens up a scholarship, and Kansas State is in the market, and they are a finalist for Donovan Williams. And that would be a terrific get if Bruce Weber would land Donovan Williams. Tell me about this guy.
He's exactly what they need, not only for their final scholarship, but if you were trying to start a recruiting class with somebody, he'd be a guy you'd say, wow, he's a very nice addition. He's a Rivals top 50 guy, 4-star player. He averaged over 30 points playing for a high school in Lincoln last year, Mr. Basketball Nebraska. And the thing that makes him so appealing to Kansas State is he knows how to score. He can get to the rim. He can create his own shot. He's good at free throws. He's a little iffy from the 3-point line, so that's one reason why maybe he only has 3 scholarships, and a bunch of schools like Kansas and Villanova who did look at him, and like Kansas brought him in on 2 unofficial visits but never actually pulled the trigger on a scholarship. That might be one reason why he didn't have a little bit more attention, but especially right now, given the circumstances, he would be by far the best possible player that they could add. And for him, it comes down to Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Texas. He's visited K-State. He's visited Oklahoma State. It makes me think those are the 2 favorites, and he's committing on Monday, and he's definitely the guy they want.
Okay, he's a 6'5", I think, 6'5" wing kind of guy.
Right, yeah, he's a wing player. You could put him at shooting guard, small forward. He would be a good candidate to come in and maybe replace Xavier Sneed next season.
Okay, for a team coming off a last place finish and a number 10 seed in the conference tournament, although they did win their conference tournament opener, but for a team coming off of the type of season that Kansas State had last year, it's a good time to start over, isn't it? Don't you think? If you're ever going to do it, now's the time to kind of clear the roster and bring in new blood and just start over. And there is some history here with Bruce Weber doing that at Kansas State.
Yeah, definitely. The last time he did it was they didn't finish last that season, but it was the year where things got real chaotic with Marcus Foster, and Bruce Weber decided to basically reshuffle the deck and hit the reset button. And he brought in 7 new players that season, and people thought, "Oh my goodness, this is unprecedented." But it worked out for him. It allowed him to bring in Barry Brown, Dean Wade, and Kamau Stokes and rebuild, and that led to some good things down the line. We'll see if they can do it again this time. It's kind of interesting to look. There's really not much outrage about 8 players leaving, which is funny because that's actually one more than the last time when it happened. But just a lot of these guys were expected to leave, so I think that's why why it's not all that surprising. But yeah, definitely. I mean, clearly the path they were taking last season wasn't all that great. So if you're gonna start over, now's probably the time.
Right. Okay, Kellis. Hey, great catching up, and we will talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks so much, Blair.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/sportsbeatkc offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Berry Tramel got to the Oklahoman about the same time Eddie Sutton returned to coach his alma mater for the 1990-91 season. And Berry was there for so many of the Cowboys' big moments, like the Final Four runs of 1995 and 2004. We talk about Sutton's long overdue entry into the Naismith Hall of Fame, and Berry opens by suggesting as much as the news was welcome and appreciated, there might have been a bit of a sour taste.
It still came with some bitter aspects. Three things come to my mind. One is Eddie's 84 years old, and how much he's able to enjoy this is really sort of up for interpretation. He's no longer communicative in terms of being able to speak. His sons hope that he understands, that they believe he understands, but they don't know for sure. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Number 2 is, and you know this, Blair, Eddie was great to be around just talking basketball. He loved to tell stories about, people throughout the NCAA tournament history that he experienced, talking about Henry Iba, talking about former players, everybody from Sidney Moncrief to Big Country. So he was such a great storyteller, and to picture him up on the stage in Springfield, receiving this honor, that's a sort of a nice thought, and it's not going to happen. Somebody else will have to accept for Eddie. And then lastly, Patsy, his great partner, his wife of 54 years, she died in 2013, I think it was. So she's not here to enjoy it. So yeah, it's great. It's he's certainly qualified, but it does come with some bittersweet aspects of why it took so long.
I'll tell you, I was getting to the point where I didn't know if it was ever going to happen. I can remember being at the Final Four in Minneapolis last year, and not that the voting occurred at a time that this could have been anticipated, but how perfect would it have been, for last year to have ended the long wait with Texas Tech in the championship at the Final Four, and then into the championship game with Sean Sutton on the bench for the Red Raiders, and then Sidney Moncrief going in with that class a year ago. I just thought if there was, and I remember talking to Sidney Moncrief about it up in Minneapolis, if there was ever a time for Eddie to have gone into the Hall of Fame, maybe one last good opportunity, it would have been 2019. But it's 2020, and it does happen. Look, I was I can remember up 20 years ago almost. I thought Eddie was qualified to go into the Hall of Fame, and look, there are well stated reasons that I've heard arguments against Eddie in the Hall of Fame. His bout with alcoholism, although I don't think that should disqualify anybody from any kind of honor. But the way things ended at Kentucky for him certainly had to have been a consideration for the reluctance on the part of the voters over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be some combination of those two things. One problem you've got with the Basketball Hall of Fame is it's a little bit of anonymous voting. It's sort of a shadowy process. When we look at the other halls of fame that we know so well, Cooperstown and Canton, even the College Football Hall of Fame, which is mostly done through chapters of the National Football Foundation. Then you get into the Basketball Hall of Fame, and they've got two processes. They have a nominating committee, and then they have an honors committee that sort of ratifies somebody in. We really don't know much about that body. And right. What I've told Oklahoma State people, and they're the ones, OSU people are the ones that have been really gotten militant over the years and angry. And I said, listen, the College Basketball Hall of Fame in Kansas City, they put Eddie in years ago. I can't remember in which class he was, but he went in one of the first classes. Right. He was one of the early entries into that thing, and that's the people that know college basketball best. The Springfield has a problem, and it's not anybody's fault. But when you're talking about candidates who coached college basketball in the United States, they're sort of jousting for position with European players from the Soviet Union in the 1970s, or European coaches who pioneered the sport, or it's just such a wide-ranging Hall of Fame that it can be difficult to really narrow down solid parameters. But I come back to this. Forget all of that. Forget the Europeans. Forget the women's aspect. Forget everything. Forget the NBA. Just look at college basketball coaches who were in Springfield, Massachusetts. And Eddie Sutton clearly belongs in that class. I mean, I might be wrong about this, but I think years ago I looked it up. I think there are two St. John's coaches in the Hall of Fame who collectively don't have as many wins as Eddie Sutton. Lou Carnesecca, Frank Lapchick. So it's it's a little bit of an East. And when it comes to college basketball, it's a little bit of an Eastern bias. I think that's lessening over the years, but that's really where sort of the roots of the Hall of Fame were. So Eddie's from Western Kansas, played in Stillwater, Oklahoma, did his best work in Stillwater and Fayetteville. He's not a child of the East. The only thing he ever did East is every time they put him in a regional out there, he went to the Final Four. But, he didn't really fit geographically. I don't know that it's anybody's fault, but it's nice that he got in. But, man, it'd been nice if he could have enjoyed it a little more.
Right. Let's talk about a couple of those teams. I picked up Eddie in the 70s when he was at Arkansas. I know that he took Creighton to the NCAA tournament for the first time in quite a while, but then he parlayed that into the Arkansas job and the triplets with Moncrief and Brewer and Delph, and just a fantastic team in 1978, and parlayed that into the Kentucky job where it fell apart for him. Sat out a year, gets to Oklahoma State, his alma mater, and just immediate success. I believe this is right, Barry. Didn't he inherit Byron Houston at Oklahoma State?
He inherited Byron Houston, and Leonard Hamilton left him a nice stockpile of talent. And he always credited Leonard for that. Leonard Hamilton's underrated for his recruiting. In a 2-year span in Stillwater, he recruited 5 players who eventually made the NBA. Now, that's unheard of now. It was unheard of then. The problem was Leonard never really got them coalesced into any kind of good team. Leonard never made the NCAA tournament in his 4 years, but he left behind Corey Williams, who played for the Chicago Bulls, Johnny Pittman was a good center. Darwin Alexander was a solid guard. And then you put those with Byron Houston, who was a big-time player. Eddie had a lot to work with. Of course, he had Sean coming with him. Sean was an excellent point guard. So Eddie took over a team that was ready to win, and he was ready to teach them how to win, and they did it immediately. They lost in the Sweet 16. Corey Williams hit a shot in the last few seconds that looked like a three-pointer. Would have tied the game. Turns out his foot was on the line. Cowboys lose by 1 to Temple, but they were off and running. And for 15 and a half seasons, Oklahoma State basketball was about as good as anybody. They didn't win at the consistently high levels of Kansas, but in that time they won 2 Big 8 or Big 12 titles. They won 2 Big 12 tournaments. I'm sorry, three, one Big 8, 2 Big 12, and 2 Final Fours. So
exactly,
it's just an incredible run for a school that has not since 1953 done much in basketball.
And I remember that '95 Final Four team that they came to Kansas City and Kemper, won the Big 12 tournament, got to the NCAA with Bryant Reeves, Big Country, and Randy Rutherford, and in a succession of victories in March, defeated Antonio McDyess in Alabama, Tim Duncan with Wake Forest, and Marcus Camby at UMass, and I believe John Calipari was the coach, to get to the first Final Four there. That was an incredible run where I think Bryant Reeves made a lot of money for himself on that particular run. And then in 2004, of course, they beat St. Joe and at East Rutherford to get to the second Final Four. That was the team with Joey Graham, the Graham brothers, and then Tony Allen and John Lucas. And neither team won a game at the Final Four, but they both got there. And I guess those, you'd have to consider those the high points of the Eddie Sutton era at Oklahoma State.
Oh, yeah. Particularly 95, they were a 4 seed. They were good. We didn't know they were great. They go up to Allen Fieldhouse at the end of the season with a chance to tie for the Big 8 title. And that's the game where the Jayhawks shut out Big Country. Didn't score.
Yeah.
Randy Rutherford.
He had 45, right?
Randy Rutherford had 45 points. Yeah.
Reeves and Rutherford combined for 45, right?
Yeah, and I remember so much about it as a day game, and I remember so much that Jayhawk fans near the end of the game were chanting, "Reeves has 0," and it was, not the classiest, chant of all time, but not, it wasn't terribly rude because it was factually correct. I mean, here's an All-American center with 0 points at the end of the game. And I remember Roy Williams walking out, and putting his hands down, trying to get the crowd to quieten down, because he was really high on he liked Eddie, he liked the Big Country. But they come back, the next week in Kansas City and played great and win that tournament, and they were off to the races. It was a really good team, really put together, four really good defenders, plus Big Country in the middle, who not the most adept of foot, but he's 7 foot, 280 pounds, and he took up a lot of space. So
exactly,
they could really play defense, and they had some. Randy Rutherford could shoot, and Big Country could catch and turn and make 8-footers on turnarounds. So they got hot at the right time and just played great and went to the Final Four, 62-61 with 3 minutes left, and UCLA dominated the rest of the game. But that was the culmination of the OSU Renaissance in terms of this is really happening. We're really back in basketball. Henry Iba was a great coach, but the last really 15 years of Iba's career were not very good. He had one championship team, 65, and most of the time they were second division in the Big 8. They were not very good. In the 70s were a dry hole. The 80s, not much going on. And literally for 30-something years, Oklahoma State basketball was mostly forgotten. And Eddie got it back rip-roaring quickly and at a very high level.
And you just said it a moment ago. He was a classy gentleman. I know he didn't have much luck in Lawrence over the years. I want to say it was his last game coaching maybe one of his last years coaching the Cowboys in bringing his team up to Allen Fieldhouse. He had some pretty bitter losses in that building for sure, but I remember him shaking the hands of Kansas players during that game. I want to say it was maybe a senior day, and he made sure to shake the hands of the Kansas players. And I just, I had a really good relationship with him, and I always appreciated that. He was always kind to me and was always took my calls, and you remember things like that. I just thought he was a very classy individual.
He liked the media, and he liked writers. He called us scribes. He sort of talked. He sort of talked in old language. So he'd call us scribes. And in this day and age, even coaches I've known for 20 years, you got to go through protocol nowadays. You got to call the PR guy, set something up, and you don't have to. But if you don't, you're going to hear about it, and it's not worth the trouble. You never did that with Eddie. If you wanted to talk to Eddie Sutton, you called him. And, he just answered the phone and would say, well, what do you need? So that was nice. And funny thing about Eddie Sutton, I can't for the life of me I have a twin brother, and we grew up huge sports fans. And we loved college basketball, just loved it. And for some reason, we didn't like Eddie Sutton. I have no idea why we didn't like Eddie Sutton growing up. And and his Arkansas teams, we loved his Arkansas teams. You mentioned the 78 team with the triplets. Every time the Dallas Cowboys refer to Aikman, Emmett, and Irvin as the triplets, I literally go bananas. Because triplets, we call people triplets because it's three alike and three of the same thing. There's nothing remotely alike about Troy Aikman, Emmett Smith, and Michael Irvin. That's not a triplets. That's a trio. It's a bass, a soprano, and a tenor. That's not what Eddie Sutton had in Fayetteville. He had three guys 6'4" that could handle the ball and could shoot and were quick and play defense. They were exactly alike, except he had three of them, and they were all all-star caliber players. So we loved that Arkansas team. We were so happy when he went to Kentucky because we hated Kentucky because they won so much, and we thought, that's just one school we can, Sutton can go coach Kentucky, and we can put all our hate on one area. And then, of course, he comes back to OSU, several years later. And my first job at the Oklahoman in December of 1991, I was hired to do the OSU beat. And OSU basketball was my assignment. And I went up there to meet Eddie Sutton for the first time. He could not have been more gracious. He could not have been more accommodating. He could not have been more welcoming. And literally for 30 years now, we've had a great relationship. Sat on planes with him and just listened to his stories. And after bitter defeats, whether it's the Final Four or the NCAA tournament, doesn't matter where it's at, when the season's over, he couldn't be more gracious and introspective, and really had his priorities straight, it seemed to me. So it's been a blessing in my career, in my life, to get to cover Eddie Sutton. So I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled for his family because it was important to them, and I'm hopeful that Eddie can enjoy this.
Very good. Barry, look, I really appreciate you spending some time with us talking about it, and I'm with you. I feel great for the Sutton family and wish it had happened earlier, but it is happening, and congratulations to Eddie Sutton. So, Barry, thanks a lot, my friend.
All right, see you later, Blair.
That will do it for today. Thanks for listening, and to the crew that puts together these episodes. Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Cap tip to K-State beat writer Kellis Robinett and Oklahoman columnist Berry Tramel for joining us today. Links to the stories they wrote that we talked about are in the show notes. Earlier in the show, you hear me shilling for a Sports Pass subscription, and that's a great offer, but so is a digital subscription to all of the Kansas City Star's award-winning news and sports coverage. That can be yours by accessing account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. We'll be back on Wednesday for another Sports Beat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.